Welcome. This will be my video on the 2024 Yorgos Lanthimos movie, Kinds of Kindness. I'm gonna start with a review that's gonna contain zero spoilers for this or anything else, and then I will get into what I call the thought section, where I will spoil everything about this movie, possibly out of order, but not anything else at all. And I think it's probably a good... Right. Yeah, so that's one of the things out of the way. Another is that the movie's rated R, and so will this video be. There... Yeah, and like Poor Things, there are things about this... I'm going to discuss them in the thought section, but there were definitely aspects that I loved. Yeah, along with this aforementioned, and let's see, what are the other ones? Dogtooth, Killing a Sacred Deer, and The Favorite. There's been something... I mean, yeah, those three I unreservedly love, pretty much unreservedly. Yeah, I found something to love about all five of the movies of his I've watched. And right now, it looks like it might be a while, but then again, I'm gonna post-date this video, so maybe by the time, but right now, no streaming service that I have access to is carrying any other Yorgos Lanthimos movies. But yeah, if that changes, then I will definitely cover more. And yes, so before I go further, I wanted to underline that when I discuss something in this video that affects, minority groups that I do not belong to, which is just about all of them, I'm still trying to figure out if my chronic pain does technically qualify me as physically disabled or not. Anyway, yeah, whenever I talk about something that goes into those categories, then I'm basing what I say on what I've heard from members of those minorities, particularly far leftist members especially. And I suppose that pretty much... It's possible that throughout some of this video I'm going to talk faster. Some of the time it's because I'm saying stuff that I feel bears repeating, but I've said before. Sometimes it's going to be because of the back pain, which I'm getting treated day after tomorrow. So don't worry about my pain, but just be aware that's why. And right, and as usual, I'm trying to not do like the auteur theory thing. I do really appreciate movies are a collaborative medium. No one person is 100% responsible for everything. So when I talk about the good things, I mean, some of it will be split into like sections. My wrists are too sore right now to look up names and other works of the people who are responsible, unfortunately, but I do acknowledge that it is not purely Yorgos Lanthimos. So, I guess that does pretty much get us into the yeah. So starting with some stuff on the writing. So this is the first of Yorgos Lanthimos movies that I've watched that is a collection of stories. There's more than one story here, and apparently, I guess that might be a spoiler. Okay, I'll save that for my... I guess just in case I forget. The IMDb trivia is well worth reading for this one. Anyway, yes. So I thought it really worked. It was definitely not quite what I was expecting. I knew almost nothing about this movie going in. This was the first Yorgos Lanthimos movie where I had barely, yeah, any prior awareness of but yeah, as such, I loved it, and as such, that the movie as well, but also the not knowing. So I'm going to not give too much. I want you to be able to also know very little when you start watching this by the end of my review. I'll try to give enough to help you make a decision. And one thing, I've come across a number of people who love films but hate when they sit down to watch a theatrical feature-length film and they find out that it is not just the one story, that there's more than one. So yeah, let's see. Other than that, yeah, so there is once again some allegory or metaphor going on. I think this might be my favorite so far of his, as far as that goes. I really felt, I really strongly, got emotionally engaged and felt like, yeah, just he's so good at making these challenging works that, I mean, they're not exactly mainstream, but I would definitely say, I try to be open to pretty much anything that isn't like, you know, conservative ideology, for being blunt. And to be clear, I have, when I was younger, I did try to really look at it, and yeah, in time I came to find it just doesn't really have anything, particularly Christian conservatism. Just yeah, um, nothing to offer that is not better in other political ideologies. Anyway, I certainly try to be open to any piece of media that, I don't know, almost any, really, under pretty much any circumstances. I first watched art films when I was a child. My parents showed me, some of this stuff I probably watched a little sooner than I should have. I don't know if I might have been too young when they first showed me Barry Lyndon, for example. But I mean, it could have been worse. Kubrick made other movies that were even more inappropriate. But yeah, and I've definitely watched art films that were more impenetrable than Yorgos Lanthimos. I feel like he has this knack for giving you so much that you really feel like, there was stuff you could pick up on and try to piece together, but not so much that you feel led by the hand. I'm trying to avoid watching too much of the latter because I did kind of fall into that for a while, and that's not really what I want for myself. And yeah, like considering that, so since we have more, like, yeah, the movie is, I think it's only if you include in credits that it's 2 hours and 44 minutes, but it's not that far off. I think it's over 2.5 hours at least. And with more than one story, obviously none of them are quite the same length as one feature film, and yeah, that I don't know. I appreciate that technically. I think, was it 45 minutes is the minimum requirement for something to be considered a feature? But, if it doesn't crack 90 minutes, it might feel, or at least 80, which nothing in this does. It can feel like, we've grown accustomed to that length. Anything shorter feels like a short film, even if a long one. But the long and short of it is that he manages to make us really I guess I should only speak for myself. I feel like genuinely invested in each of these stories, and there was never a time where I felt like something ended, like, what's the word? Like, I never felt like he stopped. It always felt like it came to a conclusion. And one of the things I love about these 5 films is I never know exactly where they're going next. And that, once again, I'm sorry, that's something that I sometimes miss when I watch, you know, as many mainstream pictures, perhaps especially American ones, as I do. I never know exactly where he's going, and then as soon as I realize what one of these movies is doing, it hits. Like, I've never been like, oh, that's it, while watching one of these, just and I think that might, yeah. So set up and payoff, very strong. There are things where you might pick up on, like, they might linger on something, so you're like, oh, okay, this is gonna, there's gonna be something more with this, but you're not gonna know what. And then there are things where you don't even realize that it is, that something is going to be brought back up. And I don't think there was even once where I knew where something would go, how it would turn out. And that you're thinking, oh, there's going to be like a serial killer or something, but you have this growing sense of unease. And the fact that it's managed here more than once in stuff that's less than what we expect from feature length. And they're not like, it's not just, at first, at the very start, I thought, because the segments have different titles, I thought, oh, this is chapters, because this is not the first time he's done chapters, but no, they are genuinely separate. There might be something that, they have in common, but they're not just different parts of the same overall story, And that's not really a spoiler. You realize that almost immediately, for at least one very particular reason. Anyway, yeah, just like you don't know exactly where something is going, but you're kind of simultaneously excited for it to get there and worried, you know. And the psychological accuracy, once again, like, there is some quirk, some oddness, not all of which I can necessarily explain as anything more than that it would appear that Yorgos Lanthimos, you know, likes to have something quirky in his films. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think everything has to mean something. And as long as it doesn't detract, and personally, I don't feel like it does. And I'm not saying that nothing that he ever puts in his movies can. I already made a video on Poor Things, which was the one that is still the one that I felt there was the most problem with. I think it's in the thoughts section of that video. But yeah, sometimes you can definitely understand where someone is coming from, why they're doing what they're doing and such, even if you don't necessarily know what that is. Like, there were several times in this where I genuinely was not sure what someone was even doing, much less why, let alone where it was gonna go. And yeah, so there are aspects where it feels authentic to real life, and it certainly always stays true to itself. And the level of detail, there are a lot of things where we get just enough to be able to piece together something, and then other times where something is really only implied or the like. And yeah, I think every step of the way it really worked. I can absolutely imagine. Or right, I guess I should say I have not read any reviews of this. I'm trying to avoid. I don't want to be too influenced by what others perceived about a piece of media. I worry that sometimes in the past that happened, and yeah. But I could absolutely imagine some would say that they left this feeling confused, and they would consider that a bad thing. Which at this point about Yorgos Lanthimos is not. There are other there are pieces of media where I leave it confused, and I'm like, that was just a bad experience. So I think it's been a little while, so the meter has recharged fully. We're going to, at least briefly, um, criticize Michael Bay. His movies will sometimes leave me confused, and it's not really like, uh, it's like visuals, really. Well, I guess sometimes the plot just also, he overcomplicates things in a really annoying way, and I know we're supposed to just go with it. I just don't find his movies entertaining enough to do so. And I don't know, maybe he's improved. I believe the last thing I watched of his was The Island, but I've watched everything he did up to and including that one. And I'm sorry, by that point, it's like, okay, is he ever gonna deliver something that's actually good? If not, then I think I'll just skip from now on. Now, the yeah, the tone, it's again this kind of, there's a certain dryness and almost distance. Like, it was not completely by accident that Kubrick was specifically who I mentioned earlier. And at the same time, sometimes what we actually see, it hits very different because this is the approach. Even though what we're seeing is something where we're like, this is deeply disturbing. And I guess that does. So yes, somewhat like Kubrick. I'm not trying to say that's all Kubrick had to offer, and I'm also not making any excuses. I appreciate, yeah, Kubrick. The way he treated Shelley Duvall, I do not think should be forgotten. And it's been so long since I myself watched his Lolita. I guess, has it been 20 years or something? And I only watched it once, but people who have watched it more recently and are objectively better at this whole movie analysis thing have also criticized Kubrick for some of his decisions there, and I am absolutely not going to argue with them on that. I wish I remembered who it was. I feel like maybe Broy Deschanel was at least one of them. I've watched several by now. Anyway, the I think that brings us nicely into, yeah, the dialogue is also great. There's these little things where someone will say something and it feels throwaway, and then it comes back and you grow to appreciate, oh, there's more to this than, like, at first was evident. And yeah, everyone, like, it never feels like a line of dialogue went unexamined in both writing and delivery. Like, every step of the way, yeah, there's so much there. Who says what and when, and if they sometimes don't say something that you might expect them to, and such. And yeah, his direction continues to be very impressive. It is not easy. I mean, nothing, any kind of good filmmaking is difficult. but combining more than one story into the same overall, because like immediately you risk, what if the audience, like, especially if they didn't know going in, what if we just like detach and you've lost us for the rest of it? So you have to make sure that each story, it feels complete, hooks us, but also we're ready to let go, even though we've spent less than the amount of time that we're used to on it. And it's also not quite the same as like a TV show episode. Well, I guess maybe one of the, I think they're called prestige TV, prestige shows. Not all shows are TV anymore. It's still a little, still wrapping my head around that one. I'm old enough. And the yeah. At the same time, it's also important for the short stories to not like be try hard, because like if you only have a limited amount of time to tell a story, you might like hit the ground running, and that can also be, because like, you know, this amount of time, if it's constantly in a hurry, then that's going to be exhausting, you know. And yeah, just the performances across the board. Right, I'm trying to keep that for later. Anyway, yeah, I guess that, yeah, that brings us nicely to the cinematography. This feels, in that respect, closer to Dogtooth and Killing the Sacred Deer than the other two that I've watched by Yorgos Lanthimos. And that was absolutely the right choice. I'm actually genuinely impressed that he managed to get this degree of emotional engagement and, you know, getting the story moving with this less, you know, like the other two are more like, you know, visually, stuff like lens choice and camera movement and such really grabs your attention even when not much is happening. And this is still, you know, so far all five of these, there are times where not much is happening, and, you know, so far never been bored during any of it. And I guess that does. Yeah, they also definitely made some careful decisions as far as shot length go. And yeah, IMDb Trivia has details. I don't really have anything to add other than it was very effective. Super effective, in fact. And let's see, that brings us to the editing. Yeah. Some of the cuts are quite harsh and have absolutely the desired impact. And then others are much more soft and forgiving. And yeah, like it's genuinely the way that he manages to make that these movies that he directs are end up this effective when, you know, yeah, for at this point I would just be repeating myself, but yeah, part of it is the cinematography and editing. He hires incredibly talented people there. The Yeah, I was also in awe of the production value, set design, locations, costumes, and makeup. They communicate a lot about the characters. You might see where someone works, how they've decorated their home, stuff like that. And yeah, nothing about it feels cheap. Like if you see a place or prop or anything in this that does not look by itself terribly expensive, it's because, oh, this is someone who maybe can't afford more than this, that kind of thing. And the I think that does pretty much, yeah, the music, yeah, I think I'm gonna speed run this because like it feels like it bears repeating. Yorgos Lanthimos, in, you know, more than one case, will score one of these with, or have someone score this with these fairly like genuinely minimalistic. And okay, so when I say the following, I absolutely do not mean it as an insult, but in some ways kind of simple, kind of, you know, sometimes there's only one instrument playing, and like it's been 20 years, I think, since I touched a guitar or a keyboard. But even back then, I didn't learn that much. This is still stuff that I feel like I might be able to play this, and it still works. Like it absolutely, it's the 100% right choice. Like I do think sometimes today we end up with scores that kind of don't appreciate sometimes less is more. And I do also, it is of course also very dependent on the movie. But yeah, I really appreciate how, especially because like these scores are such a big part of this, especially this Dogtooth and Killing of a Sacred Deer, because the visuals are less like they're a bit more low key than the other two of his I've watched. And yeah, the way that the score attracts attention to itself without stealing our focus. Like it feels like someone is like poking at you. Like it makes you uncomfortable. Some of it is just like, or not just, some of it is discordant notes. And that's underrated today, I think. Like there was a while where I want to say it was maybe, was his name Bernard Herrmann, who scored multiple of Alfred Hitchcock's, who I'm also not saying is like, a saint. Like if you go back and you listen to Psycho, notice how just the notes themselves make you like, yeah, put you on edge. And if you've never watched Psycho, maybe for example, the score of see, I remember it especially from the first 3 Silent Hill games, but I think some of the later ones, I played Silent Hill up to and including Downpour. But yeah, there's not an awful lot of licensed music, but what there is hits really hard. And yeah, the sound design is also just like some of this stuff, you know, yeah, it just really, really gets to you. It's deeply unpleasant to listen to, and I really appreciate how Yorgos manages to not overdo it. It is this, I'm not gonna pretend like I never feel like he might overdo at least one element. Um, Talked about that in my Poor Things thoughts, and I think there's gonna be at least one thing in the thoughts of this as well. And that brings us to the characters. The way that we spend all this time with these people who are not uncomplicated. Let's go with that. It's yeah, like I love how much of these films I spend just trying to come to terms with who I am watching. Trying to figure out how I feel about them at all. Because there's a saying that your characters don't have to be likable. They can be assholes as long as they are interesting assholes. And if interesting assholes could fly, Yorgos Lanthimos movies would be airports. It is genuinely like I wouldn't want to meet them, but I can't take my eyes off them. I'm relieved when I'm not watching them anymore, but I keep coming back, like it's not as though, like, listen, I believe I said in my Dogtooth video, some people are going to turn it off, not even necessarily very far into it, and I don't blame them. These movies are not for everyone, but there's so much to return for. Like, just yeah. And I think I also just, one of the things I really appreciated, I think this more than the ones before it, how much my opinion of them changed over the course of it. Because I genuinely, like, I'm not going to give away how many, but it was more than one. And that brings us nicely to the acting. And as usual, phenomenal cast. I'd be lying if I said that that wasn't one of the major reasons I was looking forward to this one. And yeah, um, this is the third time that I've watched, and I believe it's the fourth total, but I haven't been able to watch, I think it's called Bleat, maybe? But this is the third time that I've watched something that Yorgos Lanthimos directed and Emma Stone plays a character in. And yeah, I I understand why they keep working together. This is some of the best for both of them. And yeah, it's really no wonder. And you do not have to tell me. I really badly want to watch Begonia. I am so hopeful that it will go to one of my streaming services. You know, at this point there's three. Uh, only one of which I'm paying for. I'm still not willing to pay for more than one. But yeah, I believe that pretty much. Let's see. What was the no, yeah, I guess that is what I will say. This is probably also some of my favorite. I think overall it's possible that Poor Things remains my favorite of Emma Stone's performances, but there's also some fantastic stuff here. And the let's see. I'll rip the band-aid off real quick. As soon as I recognized Hunter Schafer, I was hoping she would end up being in more than she was. But even so, like, yeah, you know, both this and the Hunger Games movie that she was in, she's not in them, you know, a huge amount, but in both, like, she is stunning. I 100% understand why, like, so many people are happy that she is acting. And yeah, I mean, I can't believe I'm blanking on the title, but I know she was in one of those. Was it Osgood Perkins, maybe? Or was it someone else? She was in some recent horror. Well, I guess it would have to be recent. Fuck me. Uh, yeah, she was in a horror movie. And I've got the title written down somewhere, I think. I'm definitely gonna... Before you ask, no, right now I'm not planning on watching Euphoria. It's just, I've heard too many things about Sam Levinson that, yeah. I guess I will just very briefly say, Khadija Mbawe did a video that's, well, it's recent as of me recording this. I think it's called Oh Euphoria Part 1. And yeah, there were some fantastic points that I have to admit I had not at all heard. But yeah, I mean, that's Khadija Mbowe for you, you know? I don't believe I've ever left one of their videos not being like, wow, I didn't even realize that. Anyway, I think just incredibly even-handed, well-researched, well-considered, and also really happy to see Jesse Plemons, and I think this might be the first Yorgos Lanthimos movie, and both he and so if I understand correctly, Emma Stone actually prefers to be referred to as Emily, but she couldn't register because there's already an actress called Emily Stone, so I guess I'll try throughout this video to be referring to her as Emily. But yeah, Jason Clemens and Emily Stone are also in Begonia together, and yeah, it's no wonder they're fantastic here. And I would be very happy if from now on, every single time I watch a Yorgos Lanthimos movie, in one way or another, Willem Dafoe makes an appearance. And I appreciate I'm not saying very much about the characters here. It's just that I really want you to not know too much more than that they are absolutely amazing in this. Like, every single one of them delivers something that I was not sure I would see from them. Margaret Qualley as well, I 100% understand why she is so beloved as well, and she's also someone that I really want to watch more of. As I record this, other than this, it is, I guess one of them's, is that a spoiler? Eh, not really. Poor Things, The Substance, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And she's fantastic every single time. And yeah, that does pretty much cover. There's a couple of others who I have to admit I'm not previously familiar with, I don't think, but I'd like to watch more that they do. And yeah, just every step of the way. Like, I never felt like someone made a choice that didn't fit the character. And that brings us nicely to the pacing. I was quite astounded by how well this manages to, because there are parts that move very fast, there are parts that move somewhat slower. We've got long takes once again, for example, but it never felt like, because sometimes you'll watch something like that and you'll realize, oh, they don't know what they want to do. They're just kind of trying out stuff and leaving in, something they thought was cool or something. A lot of movies work best if they are consistent, like, yeah, I'll give a quick example. So incredibly different. Yeah, but my dad and I just rewatched the Bourne trilogy, and I am aware that there's more than 3 of those. I am not fond of the most recent 2, and I choose not to watch them anymore. But yeah, those 3 movies, especially 2 and 3, intense pretty much throughout. We're partway through rewatching Prison Break. That's also, consistently very intense. And then, I mean, you've got stuff like the yeah, in the not too distant past, we rewatched the movie Andrei Rublev, one of the masterpieces by Andrei Tarkovsky. And, that one tends to take a more, like, slow burn kind of pace, I mean, it's not as though you can't make a long movie as that one is and not have it, you can have a long movie that still moves fast. I gotta be careful not to overdo the negatives. Oppenheimer is also very popular with my father and I. And that one, yeah, in some ways it's, I don't know, I guess yeah, I think at least in some ways it's Nolan's best, in my opinion. That's, yeah. The the work within special effects and stunts, while, there's not necessarily that much of it, but every step of the way it is spectacular. Like, and I don't mean like spectacle necessarily. There's at least one shot in this where, like, I genuinely, right now, I'm not 100% sure. I think I know, but I'm not 100% sure exactly how they even did it. And yeah, they never distract. There's never a feeling that, sometimes, especially in like long stuff, there might be like a studio note, which I don't know. I kind of get the sense that if Yorgos Lanthimos gets a studio note, he has a hearty laugh and uses it to start in case he has like a fireplace that needs a little bit more kindling or something. But, sometimes long movie might get a studio, sometimes something else as well. But yeah, studio note that says you got to add something to wake people up. Never felt like that with Yorgos. And also just the fact that you never know exactly when it's coming, because it always feels like we're right on the verge of something really upsetting, and it's not necessarily gonna be something that's like, so yeah, sometimes it is just, someone will say or do something that, like, you think in any other context that would not be a big deal. It's purely because of what is surrounding it. Yeah, like, that's another thing in these 5 movies, like, stuff that should feel like no big deal because of all this careful, you know, building towards, yeah, it has that other effect. And yeah, I guess that does. Yeah, so there's I don't know, maybe I've more or less already said this, but just to make sure that it comes across, in certain ways this is a thriller, and the quality, variety, and delivery of the elements that make it so are all just excellent through and through. And I am definitely going to be talking about why it has an R rating in the thoughts section. As usual, for one of these 5, if you think there's some chance that the elements that get it an R rating might be too much for you, the answer is almost definitely yes. And yeah, I don't know, in some ways these just get better and better. And I rate this 8 kinds of kindness out of 10 kinds of kindness. And that brings us to the thought section. And this is where we start spoilers, and I will talk about at least some things that happen late from right away. So if you haven't already watched the entire movie, I recommend you save this last bit until then. So I'm gonna start by just talking about some of the elements that run through all 3 stories, because I could not help but notice that there were some commonalities. And according to the IMDb trivia, originally we were basically supposed to get one scene of story A, then one of story 2, and then one of story Z, and then back to story 1. And that could definitely have been interesting. I believe it was abandoned before editing. I think it was on the writing stage that it was decided. And I would read the original script that had them going between, because that must have been, yeah. But I do think it works incredibly well to separate them. And yeah, it's that thing of, like, it has a different effect. I think it can work very well. So I'm not going to pretend like the Sin City movies don't have some very problematic aspects that, in retrospect, I could have done a significantly better job of covering, maybe especially in my review of the first one and thoughts. But in those, there's at least some of, it'll have at least part of one of the stories partway through another of the stories or something. I'm trying to keep it vague so as to not spoil those. And yeah, it does work well there. But part of it is, of course, also that those are taking place in the same universe, which I'm not sure I'd really say is the case here. In part because these seem like they're basically set, that they're I get the sense they're in America, and they're set around the time that the movie was released, and yet you have these people who look the same across them because they're played by the same actors, and nobody comments on how, because some of these are very important people and they don't look, because like, Willem Dafoe plays two different. I mean, I'm not sure. No, I guess he does more or less qualify as a cult leader in both, doesn't he? Even in the first, even though it doesn't. In this third, he's clearly a cult leader. But anyway, yeah, I I guess I'll very briefly expand on. I'm not sure if it is either obvious or I've already gotten it across. I don't mean no disrespect to you, dear viewer, merely my abilities at conveying things clearly. The If you go between different stories partway through, then people will try to connect what we've just seen to what we're seeing now, especially right away. The first time it would cut from one of the stories to another of the stories, we would be trying to figure out, are these the same people? And that's maybe part of why they do certainly say their names early in each of these stories. That probably is at least partially why. That might be something left over from then. And sometimes they'll say, like, Liz's name was said a lot, for example, and I'm not saying there was like distracting, but I wouldn't rule out that's part of why. And so that has us thinking like that, whereas as it is now, we follow one entire story, and then we let go of that pretty quickly once we realize, oh, these are different people. They're played by the same actors, but they're clearly different characters. And so we might subconsciously notice, but we're not trying to make these necessarily part of the same universe. This is also something, for example, you know, it's been a while since I last watched a Todd Solondz picture, but he will also sometimes have more than one story, and there might be some through line, some kind of thematic, but it's not necessarily the same characters. There's stuff that separates them, and that also has that different impact compared to when it is like chapters of an overarching story. And I think that might be it for the preamble. So I guess it feels like it's been it's been a minute since I lightened the mood. So let's do yeah. So apparently it was in Emily Stone's contract that if she appears in one of these stories, there's going to be something about access to her home, or such the Liz is attempted kicked out. I would say Daniel is his name, and yeah, at this point I do not remember all these names. Plemons in the first, in the death of RMF, breaks into her, Emily Stone's character's home, and then she breaks into her own home essentially in RMF Has a Sandwich. Anyway, so to get back to the more serious, I do hope these aren't too dry and boring, but the yeah, one of the things was the way that control was, that was quite the theme here. So the first and last are essentially cult stories. In the middle one, it's this thing of Liz. I guess I need to distinguish because we meet real Liz at the very end. So outside of that, we have fake Liz. Fliz. She is asked to prove that she is not Fliz but Liz. And yeah, there's definitely some elements of control going on there. And I couldn't help but notice how much of this is people reacting to the way that the control is being exerted. Because there's so many American movies where as soon as someone tries to control someone else, it is unequivocally made out to be negative, which, to be clear, I appreciate. In real life, a significant percentage of the time, if someone else is trying to control your life, that is really, unpleasant. But Yorgos Lanthimos here explores how some people do want it, and this is not the first time that Eurythmics' Sweet Dreams have been featured in a movie, an American language movie. I know, English language, but Americans like to say they speak American. Anyway, because it's America. This was the one where it felt the most like, oh, you actually like looked at the lyrics and thought about if this applied. This is not just that you thought, oh, but this kind of fits, like, because some of the lyrics, and they're very clearly, it's not like it just plays in the background exclusively or something. I think, let's see, I think it is playing in the car, which I thought was interesting because, like, so it is bringing attention to it. Like, that is what we're hearing. At the start of the movie, it's not that a character is listening to it, but later it is. I want to say it's called diegetic. But here at the start, it is helping set up themes. IMDb trivia puts it that it is notable that we have an absence of the 20th century. The fanfare, I think it's called, because instead Eurythmics is playing over it. And yeah, among the lyrics is, some of them want to abuse you, some of them want to be abused. And that feels like the elevator pitch for this movie, and yeah, so much of what we're seeing is about people trying desperately to recreate a status quo. And I do appreciate, like, in the case of Liz, it seemed like it actually was good. But like the first and last story is like, you sure about this? This doesn't really seem like that positive of a thing. And I do appreciate that, you know, the RMF killing Clement's character is definitely trying at first to make a life without that old status quo before he struggles to return to it. And also the fact that, you know, if you're going to tell three stories that are at least partially about trying to return to a status quo, it can be interesting if you're, mixing up exactly how, they end. And so in the first one, he does indeed return to the status quo. He goes from hoping that he can maintain it without crossing the line of killing someone who is stressed to have consented to it. Yeah, by the end of the story, he did go ahead and do it. He even planned it out clearly. I didn't realize that at first. I wasn't sure where he was going, but that took deliberation. And the second one, they do return to the status quo, and it again requires the death of someone, and it's a coerced suicide. And the It's somewhat framed as a happy ending, although I do not know how they're going to explain having this mutilated corpse in their living room. Like, there's blood on the floor. Oh, right. Twins. Listen, Liz and Fliz would sometimes argue, and things escalated. And then the third one, there is a death, but not only does it not bring back the status quo, and it's the first of the three to be entirely accidental. No one planned on that. There's a drive safe and wear your seatbelt PSA if I ever saw one. But it ruins any chance of a return to the status quo. And so the various manipulations and breaking of boundaries, coercion and violations of consent. In the middle chapter, it ends up leading to happiness, and it's because of who it was directed against, because she is a fake. She's a fraud, according to the narrative, canonically, as it were. And not only does real Liz come back there at the end, but it's specifically in a response, clearly, like that's how it's framed, to Fliz's death. And obviously, given the way that, like, look at the way it's shot and edited, look at the lighting, look how dreamlike it is. There are dreams in this movie where you don't realize immediately that it's not happening for real. I would definitely say what we're seeing, I think Fliz did die. I'm not confident that it was self-inflicted. I don't think that she really was fake. I got, like, when the Plemons character is talking to the Hung Chao character, who is another, I cannot believe I forgot to mention. I'm so happy to get to be watching her in more stuff. So the other ones I've watched are The Whale and The Menu. And this was the first time where I watched a movie that she was in, and I was in awe of her performance. Even though the title was not the, and then a noun. And seriously though, she is absolutely amazing, and I need to watch her in more stuff. Every single time I watch her in something, she has me floored. But yeah, like, I don't think it's accidental that he starts with the worst piece of evidence when he's talking to her. He builds his way up to something where we're like, I guess that doesn't sound... Or wait, was it with her or was it with... Actually, come to think of it, it might have been with the other cop that he brought up the worst, the least convincing piece of evidence first. But yeah, I do agree that it ends with Fliz dying. And I don't think she was really Fliz. I think that was Liz, but she was changed by the experience. And yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I suppose maybe she was... I don't know, maybe I'm reading it too literally. I'll finish that real quick and then try to do it more. But yeah, she did say, maybe she also had some sort of mental health issue, because she was talking about the dogs and the chocolate and the stuff. But then it also ends with the visual of the dogs living out human lives, including driving, playing poker. And yeah, the I guess that does bring us... Yeah, I read it as, if we're reading it literally, if we're reading it as something that happened in the real world, I think he had a complete mental health breakdown and might have to be hospitalized, maybe even for a while. because of it, and there is an actual, I'm afraid I forget what it's called, and I'm not trying to like armchair diagnose or something, but I know there is at least one mental health, you know, problem where someone is convinced that someone close to them has been replaced by a near perfect copy, and sadly sometimes that has led to violence, even death. And yeah, so if we're reading it allegorically, then it is a story of someone who is being tested to see if they are willing to accept a near duplicate. There's almost this sort of, I can't believe I'm blanking on that title. I swear I would have it momentarily, or I will move on. Stepford Wives quality to her, and the way that she's just slightly off, So we know that Liz was, yeah, completely comfortable with, we saw the tape. They kept saying we should probably not watch the tape because it'll make us uncomfortable and it wouldn't be healthy for you either. But he insists, and eventually, he fake cries. As soon as they say, okay, we'll watch the tape, he's immediately done crying somehow, magically. Like he's manipulating even before Fliz. And to be clear, at this point, I'm saying Fliz not because I necessarily believe that this is a duplicate, but to distinguish, so which Liz I'm talking about. But yeah, so the even so, she suggests that they have sex like the first day she's home. And when they say, no, we're not going to the bed, she laughs and says, what, we're going to do it on the table? And that right there does feel like, okay, that's off. That does not feel like something that would be, yeah. And then, the yeah, he says, he has to go to work. He's already late. And she insists that they have sex right then and there. And, maybe he can wear the uniform. Maybe she can wear the uniform. And, she hits him with the club, even though it's, he's not really consenting to sex. And this feels like stuff that's the thing, could either be she's changed, which happens when someone is in an extreme situation for a while, or, I guess I'll finish, or maybe this is like, yeah, a duplicate. But yeah, the I'll just real quick. I think the last thing I have to say about the real life realistic read, Liz is dead, and he can't handle it, and maybe there wasn't even someone there. Maybe he is just maybe a significant chunk of it is all in his head, because he also said that he thought that suspect looked like, and once we see Liz, it's like not particularly, no. And yeah, so the yeah, I appreciated the way that the movie complicates things, because like it does seem like, and to be clear, I'm not making any excuses at all. I think cults are absolutely horrible. Any kind of ideology that causes more harm than good, I think we should try to fight back against. We just got to be, careful about how we do it. As I record this, Sunita Alizadeh recently recorded, uploaded a video where she talks to a fellow former Muslim about Islam, and yeah, just really, really powerful. And it's one of those things of like, obviously it is important, this, I think, especially for former and current Muslims to criticize, yeah, the aspects that, you know, yeah, the negative aspects of Islam. I'm not sure I think there's any conservative religion or conservative branch of a religion that shouldn't be criticized. Um, the important thing is, the solution is not to bomb Iran, for example. But and I'm not saying that that's what these two women were saying. Anyway, yeah, honestly, on the contrary, I'm saying they were helping bring, we need to listen more to people who have more of a connection to Iran than all these cishet white dudes. Like, yeah, as I record this, there was also a recent video, I forget who, but there was someone pointing out, like there were MAGA who were saying like, okay, listen, Trump, we get it, you got to bomb someone, but does it have to be Iran? And it's like, do you realize how absurd that sounds? Like, of course he doesn't have to bomb anyone. And I guess at this point I should just briefly note, so since I think I'm probably gonna make this public in August, so I guess it's possible that Trump is no longer in office. In that case, I certainly hope that he was, removed as peacefully as at all possible, and that he'll devote, what time he has, considering his age. I'm not wishing any ill upon him, but I would love to see him engage in restorative justice, especially after spending so much time engaging in retributive. But yeah, I think that does bring us. Yeah. I appreciated the way that Yorgos Lanthimos complicates our feelings throughout this because, like, yeah, I get why, the Plemons character is uncomfortable with Fliz and wants to get back under Raymond's thumb in these two stories, and Emily's character wanting to go back to the cult there at the end. Just we see how bad things are outside of that, and I definitely did get the sense that, we're meant to take away here that there is, like, yeah, there was that thing about, I've learned to appreciate something that's always there, even if it's not perfect. And that is like, I'm absolutely not saying that someone should stay in an abusive relationship or a cult or anything that they feel is making their life worse. But, at the other end of the extreme, there is also that there's a fantastic saying: happiness isn't getting what you want, it's wanting what you've got. And there are a number of people today who, sometimes will throw away something that is good because it wasn't 100% what they wanted. And I don't blame them individually. Okay, maybe you already got a bingo. If not, maybe this will do it. Yeah, it's capitalism, Capitalism has trained us into this notion that we should be getting everything we want every moment of every day, and that we'll get there if we just work ourselves to death so that we can enrich someone who already has way more money than they'll ever need. And even if you say, oh, but their descendants, look how many rich people hate their offspring. Like, but yeah, once again, I'm absolutely not saying that things couldn't be better. I think heavy reform, maybe even a non-violent revolution against capitalism and patriarchy, would be, important part of how we get there. But yeah, a lot of people, when they talk about their problems, you realize, oh wow, that's you kind of just need to appreciate what you have, though, because there's, you're throwing something out of your life that actually works, and then getting frustrated when you can't find something else that works. Sometimes you do have to recognize, oh wow, this person, or this group, this place is really, really good for me. We all sometimes have to adapt. That's not inherently a bad thing. It's just important that we don't do so in a way that like does more harm than good. That is, yeah, my philosophy anyway. It's almost impossible to completely avoid harm, but there should always be, what's the saying? No pain, no gain. I think that's for like weight lifting or something like that, but I think you can apply it to almost everything. If you think that there is something that will never, ever, under any circumstances, give you up or let you down, you're probably, mistaken. There's something you haven't realized yet, and yeah, it can be difficult to get there, but you'll be happier on the other side. But yeah, in real life, that's not cults, that's not abusive relationships. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, throughout this, like, I genuinely, I inherently want to see people happy. I want their problems solved. But throughout this, like, it had me thinking, like, I don't know, maybe there is no way to solve this without, like, by the time Clemens ran over RMF, I mean, I wasn't happy about it, but I was sitting there thinking, like, I don't know how else this is gonna, because, like, Raymond is fucking up his life. Mr. Smith is not gonna see you today. And let's see, the dating thing also, only it worked on Hong Chao and Emily, but not that other person. And both Hong Chao and Emily were connected to Raymond. And I think that might pretty much cover that. Yeah, and I think part of also what makes, like, I think if you only watch the first story, you might end up thinking, oh, so this is just like a fucking pro-cult movie, which, I'll just say, if you're sufficiently familiar with Yorgos Lanthimos' work, I don't think you'll necessarily come to that, in my opinion, completely erroneous conclusion. But by the end, look at all that Emily does, and she got nothing out of it. Because Rebecca, like, if she had from the start told Rebecca, listen, there's no way, we're not doing this, I don't think Rebecca would have suicided, because why would she? But by the end, both twins are dead. That's also a thing. There's a twins thing going on here, and yeah, several of the twins end up dead. But I guess that pretty much covers, let's see. Yeah, no, I think that does. Yeah. That last story, there's definitely a thing of, if Emily's character could have accepted that she was no longer a member of this cult, if she could have found another way, and I am not saying go back to the rapist. The rapist, I think, is the one case where I was like, you know what? He's not that complicated. He's just, a monster. But yeah, like, even Raymond, like, I can appreciate he does give gifts to those who, don't worry, we're gonna get to Raymond. But yeah, like, and it's one of those things of, like, I mean, is Emily's character gonna be able to get custody? There's a lot of cases where she wouldn't, and I mean, let's see, I think, right, I guess no fault divorce maybe could, but I don't know for sure. If the daughter makes a significant enough plea for the father getting custody, which she might, considering certain things, I think the court might give it to him instead. And he could, I mean, he could point out, hey, she abandoned, there was that thing about, like, oh, you got the promotion. Yeah, a year ago. it's been over a year since they last, cohabitated and was yeah. And let's see, yeah, and also the fact that the cult, I mean, they don't even care that it was rape. They just note that, well, there was sexual contact. The fact that it was non-consensual, thus rape, doesn't change anything for them, And that was another major thing here. Actually, yeah, it's like a subsection of the control. So Raymond controls when you do things, what you do, including sex, whether or not you have kids, what you eat. And yeah, I mean, some control of what people eat. That's present in all three. Sex, well, it comes up, so to speak, but yeah, I mean, the second Fliz, it's really this thing of, she wants sex, the others turn it down. And yeah, whether or not someone has children, that's definitely a thing. So yeah, that one also comes up in all three. I'm just briefly going to acknowledge I appreciate. So once again, I haven't read. I don't really know what others are saying about this, but I could imagine some would say we didn't need quite that much sex and so many miscarriages and such, because across this, with the case of Raymond had Clement's character force the Hong Chau character to have multiple abortions over a period of, if I understand correctly, 10 years. Even though she wanted, and he wanted, Clemens did want kids. And it's very understandable that she wants nothing more to do with him after that. And the Clemens character hits Fliz so hard in the stomach that she has an abortion, miscarriage. And I guess certain parts of America, she's still going to be charged with murder, huh? And thanks a lot, Republicans. And I guess that does bring us nicely to the so yeah, there's not in the third story. Let's see. I don't think there was an abortion or miscarriage in that one, but there's the thing about how she did have a kid and now she's, she occasionally show up to the kid, and she is told that that's okay, but she feels she has to oh yeah, wait, shit, that's cult speak. That's them saying, like, if you want to go back to your old life and abandon everything we've built together here for you, I mean, I guess I just expected better of you. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Go. But yeah. Let's see. I think that does pretty much go. Oh, right. And at this point, I should say, I am not a prude. If you want there to be sex in your piece of media, as long as it has an appropriate age rating, like, I think there are almost no cases where it should involve even one character who is underage, and it should never be with an actor who is. And yeah, and intimacy coordinator. Other than that, that is pretty much. And yeah, if it's a actor who does not yet have a lot of sway in Hollywood, or I guess that once I've said intimacy coordinator, maybe that is covered. I don't think those are only for the big names. But yeah, no one should feel coerced into it. And I'm not saying that I don't think I've heard of, that being the case for this. Yeah. Anyway, I think that might be more or less it for the sort of overarching. Yeah. So, some conclusions. According to IMDb Trivia, Yorgos Lanthimos has expressed that he feels that it is still such a big part of society today, this thing of, at least one person having a lot of control over someone else's life, their, um, including their death. And yeah, like that is the thing. You could definitely read Raymond. I mean, we know, like, if you read it as literal, then he appears to be an exceedingly rich man. And yeah, I mean, I don't think it's accidental that he does have good taste. Like I've heard, my father has read Anna Karenina and is very big fan of it. And I don't know, I guess I'm probably gonna be accused, perhaps rightly so, of overanalyzing. Well, I guess that's probably already. I think that ship has left the station, frankly. So let's go for it. I can help but notice that the expensive stuff that the Plum's character gets is like broken stuff. Like it's not something he could actually use, and it's not actually aesthetically pleasing. It's just like, oh yeah, look at this. I don't know. I guess maybe some would say for the helmet, maybe, but it's a broken tennis racket. Like, yeah, I'm sure it is expensive. It's a collector's item, but it's empty though. There's nothing like, yeah, it's just something expensive, and that is sometimes how rich, powerful men give gifts. It's just something that you can show off and be like, see, it costs this much money. And I think, but yeah, the way that it explores also how people respond to others exerting control over them, how eventually it can actually become the norm to the point where they'll want it if they lose it. And I think, does that pretty much get us to the, yeah, I think I'm going to try to do some more or less chronological scene by scene now. So, yeah, like, one of the first things we see is the bare legs of the Market the Quali character. Quali always brings that quality. Acting, I mean. And it's one of those things of like, we're obviously meant to notice because it is a conspicuous shot. I'm not saying that I've never seen someone film the back of someone's bare legs before, but like we're not even seeing her back. We're just seeing the legs. It's this like frog's eye view as she's walking away from the camera. It is following her. Like, there's that thing about at one point, the Plemons character says, are you fucking? And like we are meant to think of, there is a sexual element to the relationship there, and that is also pretty much confirmed by the end of that story. And yeah, after that we do appreciate there is more to both character and actor, but yeah, like the first and just immediately I love how quick, like it does hit the ground running when it comes to weirdness. Open the door. Yeah, he's here. BMF, RMF. RMF. Well, I'm sorry, but it looked like a B because of the fancy lettering, which I love the way these lines come in these 5 movies. Just like every single one of these. has at least one line where it's like, that's truly spectacular. Like, what a detail. Because, like, it doesn't change anything. You know, it's just, yeah. And seriously, same. I do not understand why people find it appealing in any way, shape, form, or fashion when someone does lettering so fucking fancy that you can't tell what fucking letter you're looking at. Anyway, except if you're like trolling someone, if you're trying to make something look like something else. Moving on. Yeah, and she describes exactly what he looks like. She pays him. For my peace of mind, I'm going to assume that that's like someone else's inheritance, or he's going to go immediately donate to charity or something, because like that money's not going to do him any good once he's dead, because that is evidently what he's being paid for, you know. And not long after, we meet Clemens' character, and he talks about Raymond too. You know, we already knew that she was talking to Raymond on the phone. And, you know, we get these little things about how, oh yeah, Raymond did this, but he's also demanding this. So I am just going to say it. I really read this as being about conservative Christianity and Raymond being a stand-in for God, for Yahweh. Because I think let's briefly go over. So the most shallow shit, let's get that out of the way. Old white dude. Yeah. But beyond that, he will give you gifts if you obey and love him. You are meant to praise him even when he is not around. Like, notice they keep saying positive things and saying how much they love him, with big smiles plastered on their faces. You know, like, this doesn't really sound like this is not a healthy relationship. You know, no one should be just constantly talking like that about anyone. Like, that's not even how I talk about like the people I admire the most, you know, not 24/7. And if you do not do what he commands, including and not limited to murder, you lose his favor, and as such will suffer unless you can regain it. Because that is what, yeah. And I think I'll just real quick nip in the bud. I think some might say, oh, but no, but he must be the devil because he's evil. See, the devil doesn't tell you to do things you don't want to do. He tells you you should do that sinful thing that you're already considering. And if you do what the devil says, then you suffer. And that's not what we see. You know, none of that applies here. Like, over and over, Clemens will say, you know, he said, no, listen, I am eating this stuff. I'm gaining weight. You just can't see it. And Raymond keeps saying, no, that can't be the case, you know, and that sounds like someone desperately trying to live up to the impossible demands of Yahweh and being scolded for somehow not being able to. You know, I'm not the first atheist to point out how were they supposed to know that it was evil to eat from the tree of knowledge, considering that the tree of knowledge was what contained the knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil? Like, it makes no sense, you know, and that's one of the first stories in the Bible. It just immediately, it right out the gate, you know, just like, okay, we're gonna fill kids' heads with nonsense. That's what we're gonna do. And then we're gonna not even really act surprised. We're just going to pretend like it's not happening when they grow up and they have like various problems. Like, I have met so many conservative Christian adults who it's so clear they were traumatized as children because they were taught horrible things. Like, you know, the entire concept of hell. I don't think you should tell a child about hell. I just don't. If you cannot compel your child to, like, listen, I've never believed in hell. I'm not gonna pretend like I've never done anything wrong, but like my parents knew that that was not how to get me to behave, you know? And yeah, a lot of the people I've met in my life who behaved the best were people who did not believe in hell, who just knew, well, what we do affects other people, so we should try to do good so we can help other people. As I record this, recently Emma Thorne did a video on chick tracts, wherein she points out this, that at least one of the chick tracts outright says, no, no, don't do good, don't bother. That's not going to get you into heaven. And she says, well, we agree on that, but I think that's an argument against being a conservative Christian, I think that's an argument against this kind of belief. Not in favor of it, as he does. Like, I'm sorry, if you're telling people that you have power over that they should not do good, but they should just worship without question, you're not trying to make them good people, you're trying to make them pliable. You just want power. That's what powerful conservative Christians want. Power, money, and in America, those are the same thing. Yeah, tithes and votes, and that's it. And I'll lock the door or slam it in your face if there's a natural disaster and they've got plenty of room. Anyway, and talk about how, commercial flights means you're surrounded by demons. And they get very angry when asked, so you mean the other passengers? As if that is not the most obvious. Like, what the fuck else are you talking about? What, like noise pollution? Then say that, you weirdo! It sounds like you're saying that your own flock are a bunch of demons. Anyway, moving on. And it's also like, listen, I've flown. Sometimes it's loud. There is such a thing as like noise canceling stuff, and you can close your eyes. You actually don't have to keep your eyes open for almost the entire flight. So, just saying that's an option. Anyway. Okay, one more. And a lot of conservative Christians, they love keeping their eyes closed to the truth and reality anyway. So, should fit right in. Anyway. Yes, so we have the, let's see. I think that does pretty much get us to the, yeah, and there's the, so he, yeah, Yahweh is specifically told. Let's see, I need to come up with a nickname. So Raymond, in my read, is Yahweh. Wayway is specifically told, oh yeah, it's a favorite person. They're even like, it's not enough that like they're doing everything he says, but it also has to be like, oh, that's the best thing ever. You've never given me such an amazing present. She was so happy about it. She liked it more than anything else you've ever given us, and you've given us so many things, and it's amazing, and we're worshiping you every single. It's just please stop telling me that I have to gain weight. I'm trying, okay? And no, I'm not going to be able to, do this car accident, And yeah, like the bit where we see the car accident and hear the car radio, and yeah, like really underlying, yeah, this is about, some want to abuse, some want to be abused. Rayway wants to abuse, and these others want to be abused. And the look on Arameth's face. Because it's not like, what the fuck, man? It's like, or it's, what the fuck, why did you do that? It's like, really? We agreed on how this would go. Why aren't you doing it properly? Like, that is the look of someone who's like, okay, we need to move this piano. So I'm going to count to 3, and then we'll both lift. 1, 2. Why are you lifting already? God damn it. Okay, we're going to have to start over. And, he keeps insisting on being hospitalized and ends up having to go home. And the detail that the child character did not know. She's like, what happened? Rayway's ways are, shit, what's it in English? I know it in Danish. The Lord's ways are something to us. We do not understand why he does what he does. And that's why he gives cancer to babies. Now stop complaining about it, okay? And Anne sends babies to hell just because they haven't been baptized. Like, seriously, what the fuck? And we're supposed to worship him. We're supposed to think best, nothing's better than this. Drowns 99.999, etc. of anything that cannot at length survive underwater or in air. And we're supposed to think that's the best thing ever. And the devil is bad because he's trying to get you to not worship the genocidal. Like, genuinely, there's never been. It's not even. Like, it's barely even hypothetically possible for an individual to so effectively carry out a genocide as the one they put in their own holy book and then says it's proof of his love because, he didn't kill absolutely everyone. Maybe that's an underrated argument for the defense of a serial killer. Maybe someone should try it. Anyway, he goes to the hospital and says, I can't drive faster. And eventually he admits, if I drive faster, RMF would not have made it. And Rayway says, exactly. That's the point. And he even, like, there's a thing about, he says, those doctors, they have no idea what they're doing because they didn't do exactly what I wanted them to, which, wow, that is. I mean, I already mentioned that, he reads as like a conservative Christian to me, an American, so there you go. Yeah. Why aren't you just giving me the miracle cure that the president keeps saying exists? Now, I think that does bring us nicely to the... So yeah, he is rejected and dejected, and he does tell Chow everything. And I will also say, I don't think it would have hurt if we had gotten just a little bit more of how it affects her emotionally, because like this, like this is not a pleasant situation for him, but it's worse for her. And yeah, let's see. After the, as part of the rejection, the gift is taken back. And we have the thing about like, oh yeah, he knows the code. What was it, his birthday, birth year? I forget, something. And Chow just can't believe it. She's like, even after he says, oh yeah, Rayway stole it. Who stole it? Someone must have stolen it. That's weird. Because she can't wrap her head around that Rayway would do something like that. And that's, like, we do see conservative Christians simultaneously say that if you've done if something bad happens to you, it's because you're being punished. And I swear I'm trying not to make this just about how awful conservative Christianity is, even though it is. Anyway, these conservative Christians will then turn around when something really bad happens to them and say, why me? Well, I mean, by your own faith. So it doesn't even bring them comfort. Like for a while, they're like, well, nothing bad's going to happen to me because I am such a good person. And then something bad happens and they're confused instead of finding... Moving on. So but yeah, he does try to get another job, and that does not go well. And I love the little details about, so, at first he's asked, do you have children? There's a thing about like, oh, see, this, this is my child. Ah, he's so cute. Do you have children? No, she can't. And then later he says that's what, and that's just, it's unbelievably fucked up that he forced her to have. He sneaked the abortion pill into yeah. And let's see the yeah. Then when he goes to the new place, he tries to sort of reenact it, you know. So he just goes up to her and asks, "Is that your kid?" And I'm immediately sitting there thinking, I'm not sure why you wouldn't immediately ask grandchild, because I'm sorry, I'm not saying that, you know, she looks bad or anything, but she does not look, or maybe it's just a really old photo, I guess. But yeah, like grandchild, like obviously, but that's the thing. And then, you know, afterwards, she didn't ask. You know, she didn't ask if he had one. He just volunteers, you know, we can't have one, which is not really something you say to a complete stranger if they didn't ask if you had kids, you know. She's trying so hard to just be polite to him, you know. Um, but we also have we see here very clearly that it has genuinely kind of altered the way he interacts with the rest of the world, you know, and that is, yeah, 10 years, you know, Rayway has been controlling him for so long. He can't think outside of this box anymore. To him, everything must be this, you know. So when you meet someone, if you see a picture of a child, you have to ask, you know, is that yours? Well, I can't have any. And you know, when he tries to meet a new partner, he still uses that trick that he was taught. And you know, the second time it does work. And I love the way that that was shown as sort of a flashback. I debated with myself. I eventually decided I didn't want to reveal that in the review. But yeah, I mean, I think this is the one that has the most of a non-linear timeline. It's still not that much of these three, five. Yeah. But yeah, all three of in whatever. I'm gonna move on. The yeah, so the fact, you know, he just sees her, and then he like walks, you know, it cuts to another scene and he walks up to her and now he knows her name and is handing her flowers. And like, yeah, for just a tiny bit there, I was thinking like, I mean, he is stalking her because she is surprised he's there, but is he doing it without them even having met even once? Like, it's still wrong. I'm not saying that, but it's worse if there's absolutely no, you know, prior contact. Because like under certain circumstances, this is a romantic, you know, gesture. But no, when we get the brief flashback, yeah, this time it did work. And there's the thing about, you know, I didn't mind the step. What step? I don't know. I didn't mind it, but I do mind the pain in my foot. Does it hurt bad? It doesn't hurt good. And yeah, you know, it becomes clear she's also got a relationship with Rayway. She's got the racket. What a racket! And he breaks in and steals it because you know, just yeah, he feels it belongs to him, and he can't sell for as much as, you know. I mean, first they just offer 10, and then they settle on 12. He wants 20. That's not nothing of a yeah. And I guess that covers. I feel like there was one more thing. Yeah, and so yeah, he goes to the hospital, and yeah, you know, she was in a car accident, and she says she doesn't remember, but it is very clear, you know, she hit RMF just like Ray Way said she had to. She did it hard enough to put herself in the hospital and him, but not hard enough that RMF died from it. It was enough to gain some favor. And that's such an important part of, you know, whether we're talking cult or conservative Christianity, if you are a member of an ideology where they will make extreme demands and punish you very harshly if you do not live up to it, they almost definitely consider you replaceable. They will find someone else to do the thing that you are saying you won't do. And yeah, like I think violence should only ever be the last resort. It solves almost no problems. But I do think, you know, so yeah, like politically and, you know, yeah, there are various ways we should be fighting ideologies like that. But yeah, um, and he's careful to avoid them seeing that he's there. And yeah, she asks for help to go to the bathroom, and he acquiesces, and then he asks the orderly for the same. And immediately I'm like, ah, right, because she just said, and he's again like trying to live out the script that someone else, he doesn't really make decisions for himself. He tries a little bit, but by the end he's back in line. And then when he steps out, he's got the access card. He's got he's wearing the scrubs, and I love the bystander effect in clear. Like in real life, I think it's horrible, but it's such a potent distillation of it because it's just a few seconds. But like the patient sitting there saw enough to know that that's not and it also it's ill-fitting, which is a good detail because like yeah, it's the other the actual orderly was a little heavier. I'm not shaming, I'm just saying there's nothing wrong with I'll just very briefly run through. So in case you don't know, or I think it bears repeating, being a lot of people are mistaken for being unhealthy just because they don't look like really skinny. It is going to kill you faster, and it's more likely to kill you to be underweight, even by a little, than to be, really overweight. And the cost of, yeah, some people will bring up, oh, but why do the rest of us have to pay taxpayer money for people who are overweight? Well, there's other stuff that costs more that you don't complain about. I've especially noticed, I don't know, I'm just going to say, I have noticed that at least some people who smoke and clearly aren't really comfortable about the fact that they do will say, well, what about, fat people? Why are they, we have to pay for them? I mean, I'm sorry, but like lung cancer is actually, I'm not saying that, listen, live your life. Just don't go after someone else because you feel bad. Like work that out with yourself. Don't criticize someone who's not like. There's so much hatred against. Let's see. There's actually a word for. There's so much fat phobia. We really have to fight back against that. There's so many people who end up with eating disorders, and that's my real problem. Like if you want to smoke, I mean, I prefer if, don't do it as like a child or teenager, but if you're an adult and you're like, you really badly want to smoke tobacco, or, like if it's legal in, the part of the world you're in, I'm not going to tell you not to do something harder than that as long as, if you can keep it, um, yeah, if you can control it, which I'm aware, I've encountered some people who used to do drugs and, they didn't become, you know, they didn't develop problems on account of it. Now, um, yes, so yeah, so this patient just sits there, just watches as he walks off and doesn't say anything, doesn't do anything. And I think that is, yeah, so he gets a wheelchair, gets RMF out, is careful to avoid, you can hear the flatlining and the whole thing, and then, dumps RMF on the right in front of the hospital. I don't think I've ever witnessed someone doing that when the patient was already inside the hospital before, so that's appreciate the new experience. But seriously though, how fucked up is that there are people who will just abandon someone in front of a hospital? And that some will not even be let in if they can't afford the treatment. Anyway, Oh, I guess I should say that the fact that it's not someone who works at the hospital who's dumping them outside the hospital. That's the part that I've never seen before. Anyway, that I can recall. And then he gets in the car, and just the fact that it's not just once. He runs RMF over twice, and the fact that it's done in a long take. And like, I'm almost certain. So the actor playing RMF is not actually unconscious. I mean, is there any chance? Like, I don't even know how. Maybe there's at least some visual effects trickery going on. Can you even dump someone like that without risking them injuring themselves if they're not allowed to put their hands on? Maybe they shot him against like a green screen. Maybe he's falling on something soft that's green in a studio, and they just implemented the shot there, something like that. And obviously what's being run over is a dummy. And I'm thinking later when Quali jumps, she doesn't actually jump. She just moves up to, and then they animated, or maybe she jumped in front of a green screen, and then there's maybe that is her lying at the bottom. Yeah, maybe she was actually. Maybe they shot it twice and combined the shots, and so in the one where we, when we see her lying there at the bottom, that she was just lying there from the start, I could imagine. Anyway, I guess that does pretty much so. So yeah, that gets him back in the good graces, and that's it. That's the whole story. So let's see about the Fliz story. RMF is flying. I kind of love the way that yeah, like RMF, like he's significant in the first one because the whole thing is, is Clemens willing to kill him? Is Emily going to kill him? And then in the second one, yeah, he's the one who flew to bring back. Yeah, so that does mean maybe he purposefully brought back Fliz, or maybe he did bring back Liz, and Clemens didn't accept that it was Liz. And then the third, he eats a sandwich, and then yeah, during the end credits, he's sitting there eating a sandwich. I don't think he even appears in the regular story at all. Not that I noticed, at least. Um, but yeah, so the yeah, from right away, it's clear that Clemens, sorry, is really struggling with that whole situation. And yeah, once again, the way that Chief is describing, listen, look at the way he's being around that suspect. He looks like they had sex for the first time, and he's trying to figure out if he should say that he loves him. That's such a perfect way to put it. And yeah, so they all the three of them meet up and talk about Liz, and just the detail that they can't even remember what it was she said. And when you actually see her face, like, she doesn't really look like she was being terribly polite about it. She looks disgusted. And also, I don't know. I think, listen, I'm not gonna claim that I've never fucked up a meal. I think it takes a special, like, did you leave the building? Did you forget that you had food in there? How do you, like, yeah, she says it was, completely burnt. I appreciate that they didn't underplay that at all. Like, it looked inedible, frankly. I'm not even sure you could remove enough of the black to eat the fish inside, but yeah. And they don't even remember what the joke was, just she said something and people laughed, yeah. And let's see. I don't know. Okay, I don't think I made clear where I'm going with that. I'm not sure Liz was that great of a person. I think this was a situation where they can't quite admit that she was not so wonderful, but Clemens needs her to be. And so, you know, they pretend she was, because it is, and that is like, listen, grief is already complex enough. Trying to grieve someone who had significant flaws, that's fucking difficult. That really is, yeah. So, other than that, I already talked about the tape. Yeah, for example, I don't think it needed to cut back to it. Like it's showing it to us very briefly. I don't know, not necessarily bad. I appreciate that sex is part of what's going on here. The fact that when Fliz arrives, she wants sex, and she's seemingly being about as casual. Let's see. I think yeah, she's being more casual even about it than Liz was, and yeah, that is also something. Sometimes when people change, one of the things you see it in is how they are sexually. And let's see. Yeah, I think most other things about this chapter I may have already said. Let's see. There's a part where he talks about, where's the phone, which no one even suggests, like, try calling it, because that's also always my go-to. But that's like, so yeah. Again, that needs explaining. I'm not saying it's bad writing. I'm saying that was deliberate. I got the sense that he needs the phone to be gone and for it to be her fault. That's why he's not bringing it up. And she maybe doesn't really want the phone found because she doesn't like that he's blaming her for it. And it's one of those things like, so the following is not going to be news to anyone who has who is a survivor of domestic abuse. But if the domestic abuser is in a bad mood, then there's nothing you can actually do that will change that. No matter what you do, they will find some way for it to be wrong. But yeah. At the same time, you could also read it as this is Fliz. She is, I mean, technically there isn't really anything in the movie that 100% rejects the notion that maybe she did do it on purpose. Maybe he's right. And she's just like, how the fuck did he know? Kind of thing. Anyway, I believe that does bring us nicely to the other. Yeah, she says that she's pregnant, which I also do appreciate as this thing of like, so for all the sex it shows, it doesn't actually show them having sex after she's back. And she says the words, the doctor says it might have been something psychological. And that again is like, wait, what Fliz means is that it used to, the reason they couldn't become, sorry, I know, I want to be respectful. I know some women hate it when someone says, about a couple that they are pregnant. A pregnant person can be pregnant. But the fact that Liz never became pregnant might have been like a psychological block or something. But she's also like, we haven't seen them have sex, so how can she be pregnant? Like she's, because she must be in the early stages of pregnancy, from the way it looks. Yeah, how could that be? Or maybe it's not his baby, but in that case, why is she telling him if it's impossible for it to be his baby, kind of thing? So, and again, like maybe they did have sex and we just didn't see it, but just the way that it's framed, because like so easily there could have been like, and he doesn't. I don't think he even says like, but we haven't had sex or something. So yeah, nicely done on that. And yeah, she did lose the baby because he punched her. And she does say, yeah, he hit me. But there's so much, he's under so much pressure. And she says that the medicine makes him aggressive. See, I would definitely say I got the sense from that doctor that it was supposed to have the opposite effect. And that suggests that he had a lot of aggression and or is not taking the medication, just pretending. And then we get the mutilation. So yeah, he says he asks for food. And can we just take a second to appreciate how much they do to really humanize Fliz? Because like, yeah, she did go shopping. She's not just like randomly yeah, like she genuinely seems like a fairly happy person when Clemens isn't fucking that up for her, and but yeah, you got the chocolate, you got the shoes, and which also like, yeah, people change. Like, listen, I'm sorry, if I had survived for a while on a deserted island, I might eat something that I hadn't before when I got home. That's just a thing that might happen. Like that's, people's tastes change over time, especially if they experience something really like yeah, I mean, it's not like she's eating something that's just like, whoa, nobody should be eating that kind of thing. And let's see, the yeah, also several times they talk about, there's a thing about, what do you think they're eating? Fish, I guess. Oh, what did you eat? Fruit and fish. So we've got that a little bit, and then the last one they say, oh, you really shouldn't be eating fish. So yeah, and yeah, we're gonna have the thing about controlled eating, and the fact that fish was not the first thing she said when it was the first thing he said, and I appreciate she wasn't present for that, but that had me thinking, and I think that was also what he was thinking, maybe evidence that she's Fliz, not Liz. And that is a genuinely interesting notion, because it's also like, maybe it's just not the first thing that came to mind, whatever. And yeah, the scenes with Willem were great. And the way that, yeah, I mean, I don't know, I think at least some of the time he was being very reasonable, because it's true, Clemens was treating Fliz like shit, but some of the time he was also kind of going overboard, and it's of course the thing about, in-laws. Sorry. There's a very specific way you have to say that. In-laws. But yeah, I think that does bring us nicely to, yeah, so he asks for a finger, and I think at that point he's just testing to see if she'll actually do it, and she cuts it off, fries it up, and she passes out at first from the pain. And again, I appreciate that, because like there's a lot of stuff where we either wouldn't see it or it would just be like one quick chop. She has to slice through it, and it's just enough that it's like, it doesn't feel like it's lingering on it to just be like, see, look at what we can get away with. But it's also so long that we're sitting there like, oh my God, and yeah, brings it to him. And he says, can you believe she served me her finger? This motherfucker. And I underestimated Yorgos Lanthimos, because I was actually going to make a joke about, like, she brings it to him, and then he's like, I actually changed my mind. Just throw it out. Not only did he go sort of there, he went to, like, no, he feeds it to the cat instead, and then tells her, your fingers are repulsive. I fed it to the cat. I mean, I don't know if it would be good for her to have it sewed back on at that point once it's been cooked, but still. And yeah, then he says he's not just hungry, he's famished. And feed me your liver. Not a stray cat. And she does indeed cut it out. Cut it out. And Full House quote. Bonus points if you repeated what I said. And you may now drink. Anyway, that's probably at least on the edge of being too obscure of a reference for me to make. Anyway, the yeah, he's reunited with Liz, and it ends. Right, we have, yeah, so the other thing about the missing phone. Yeah, so they pull them over, and they don't even try the entrapment thing of like, do you know why I pulled you over? But yeah, and asks for the phone and says, how did you get this? Did you get this from Liz? This is my phone. And immediately the other cop is like, we probably should have taken more seriously the very clear signs that he needs more time off the force and possibly just permanently leaving the force. Although, of course, in America, if you're leaving the police force, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's because you told the truth about them to someone outside, across the thin blue line, or you really fucked up like major, because they've gotten away. Some of them, not every individual one, but some of them have gotten away with shit they absolutely should not. Yeah. Now, I think that does bring us to the yeah, and he shoots the other one in the hand. Jesus fucking Christ. And that's a good, that tells us, this might get violent. And yeah, the fact that no one actually gets Liz away from there, the doctor does tell her and, points out doctor-patient confidentiality and everything, but yeah, and she ends up dead. And that is sadly, sometimes how it ends with abusive relationships, domestic abuse. Domestic partners, not domestic relationship. Yeah, abusive relationships. Abusive partners, that's it. Anyway, I think an abusive partner, I think is how you phrase it. Yeah. Trying to learn the terminology. I'm not complaining about the people who are coming up with the terminology. I'm frustrated with the people who ruined a lot of perfectly good words by misusing them on purpose or making light of serious situations. And yeah. Anyway, I think that does bring us nicely to the third and final story. And yeah, the way that there's some emphasis on the water, there must be something in the water, saying Katy Perry. And here we see that it's the tears of Aka and Omi. And yeah, genuinely super fucked up to see the whole oh my god. Yeah. So that's when we have the let's see, what was the other thing? There was another thing, but what was it? The yeah, so they that's when we yeah, when Hunter Schafer is there, and just yeah, like every single little detail, like she puts so much thought and effort into the performance. And like even if I didn't know how popular she is for Euphoria, and if I hadn't already watched that Hunger Games movie she was in, even this I think would have been like, okay, I gotta watch more than that she's in. Now, I think that does. But yeah, so and also just so the yeah, it's oh wait, shit, sorry, that was RMF, wasn't it, on the table? Or was that only later? RMF is the one brought back, isn't he? And then he eats a sandwich. So yeah, the first time we see him, he dies, and the last time he's brought back. And yeah, like both of the times, I was genuinely sitting there like, shit, I don't know, maybe they will be able to bring the dead back to life, And also just to start the story, I mentioned in the review, it might be a good idea to try to really hook the audience. If you start a story with someone going up to, someone who works at a morgue and being told, okay, you have 10 minutes with this corpse. Yeah, you got my interest. I mean, I don't want to watch what I think. Like, I'm a beast. To be brutally honest, my first thought was that it was going to be something sexual or something. But yeah, thankfully not. And we note the measuring, and there's a couple of questions, and then okay, so this is the final test. And I also love the element that at the start of this story, it's consensual, and at the end, it's coerced. And the first one doesn't, but the last one does work. And she didn't even say the words, did she? I don't think Wally said the words. Emily did, and that was enough. She the hands were. I think she put her hands on the body, and he wakes up immediately. And again, like that's such an interesting, this thing of, I mean, I think it maybe speaks to that sometimes you can wield power without trying to, and people with a lot of power or access to someone with a lot of power should be very responsible with it, you know? There have been presidents that clearly were not completely, yeah, like there were various reasons why they probably shouldn't have been presidents, and the people around them were not necessarily responsible, didn't make sure that the president didn't do something horrible with all that power. Anyway, so the right, I think I also just want to briefly note how wonderfully different their performances are across these, because like the major characters are played by the same actors, you know, and yeah. Let's see. So there's the bit where I think that's when she goes to a kid's home, and yeah, you know, puts the Nikes, I think those are, on the bed, and you know, sprinkles some of the holy water, I guess, you know, to make to bless her life, even if she can't be a member of the cult. And I appreciated that we do see the picture on the, you know, so on the picture, not only do we clearly see Emily, but we can also easily tell, yeah, those are the man and the child that we just saw leave the home. So this was her, and yeah, you know, Clemens is immediately like, so you saw them, right? You saw your family, and she keeps having to make excuses. You know, at one point she is like, oh, you've got a temperature. I'm gonna have to, you know, oh, don't worry about, you know, I will read the thermometer. Don't worry about it. Oh, yeah, it's definitely saying that. No need for you to look. And you know, she does miss dinner, but she is, yeah, and let's see, right. So before the rape, we also have the bit where they talk to let's see, yeah, we have the thing about like, oh, okay, here we have someone, and then when they get there, the age is wrong, and both of them are dead. Not, you know, it's that thing about it needs to be twins, and one of them dead, and yeah, you know, the quality is like, listen, I get it, I'm supposed to be dead, but in 2 minutes, it's gonna be completely dealt with. Jesus fucking Christ. And once again, that's cult shit. You know, some people are willing to commit suicide because of what the cult says, you know, and I I'm just going to say that if you know someone who is struggling, you know, do what you can to make sure that they have access to the resources, because like sadly a number of people commit suicide, they, you know, under, if they had been, if there had been more outreach, and I'm not, to be clear, I'm not blaming anyone near them. I fucking hate when people do that. But you know, if you are currently in a situation where you've noticed that someone in your life is, you know, sad to the point where you're worried about them, you know, I'm not saying it has to be you. You know, not everyone is great at talking to, and there's no shame in that. You know, it's difficult to talk to someone who is, you know, so depressed that that's where their head's at. But you know, a lot of different places in the world, you can find a local number to someone who can talk to them, you know, a suicide hotline. Let's see. I think that does bring us to, yeah. And so they think it can't be Quali because, oh, I need to, let's see. Ruth is the one they end up, that Emily ends up finding out is the actual, yeah. Yeah, so Ruth's twin. You know, yeah, we have the thing about the dream, and I appreciate how dreams are sometimes kind of, yeah, what's the word? Premonitions. You know, you've got the one with Plemons where first it's like black and white. He goes up, he's still eating, and then he does almost the exact same thing. He left, he already ate the food, but yeah, and let's see. Yeah, I already mentioned that it felt so dreamlike when Liz returns at the end of RMF is Flying. And I think that does bring us, let's see. I believe that does bring us to the bit where they, so yeah, they say, well, there's no way it's Ruth because her sister is still alive, and I think that's the part where so, the husband lures her in, and like, if I understand correctly, she doesn't even drink liquor anymore. She only drinks, the tears of the prophet, but that was also, God, the part where, so we see, like, it's very clear, like, okay, that's a lot of people carrying water, and they all walk up to the same place and then, empty out the canister of water, and then later we see the crying into it. At this point, I don't even remember. Do we also see it being scooped up or did we just deduce that? But yeah, that's horrible short-term memory under certain circumstances here. Right, and the part where the woman in the thing, she says, I swear I haven't had sex with anyone but the two of you, and later that's why Emily's excommunicated. And yeah, I can't help but notice that there's locks on the outside, multiple even, of the Sweat Lodge. That's pretty much crimson red flag right there. And yeah, if I understand correctly, she ended up sweating to death in there. She had a heart attack. And they're not like, holy shit, we killed someone. They're just like, well, guess she wasn't the one. And oh right, that's all. Yeah, that's where we also have a brief bit about whether or not someone is pregnant there, because there's the thing about, like, who are you going to sleep with? Well, you're in luck, period. And then she says she was so late she started thinking of names. And yeah, so he says he thought of a drink, he named it after her, and then he drugs not just one but two of those for her, and rapes her while she's unconscious, and apologizes but doesn't really come out and fully admit, just like, yeah, just utterly repulsive. What a piece of shit. Yeah. And there's also the part where so we have the excommunication, and she does try the Sweat Lodge, and they say, we're going to set it to the highest possible temperature, which did have me wondering if this was the death of Emily. But yeah, so and they, she tries to kiss one of them, and they pull away. She's being, like, practically pushed out, the gate locked behind her. And then she says, can I have some water? And I don't think any of them even responded to that. They didn't even give her anything to drink after having her in the Sweat Lodge. That's how disposable she is to them. Whether we're talking a cult or capitalism, like, yeah, oppressive ideologies. And I appreciate some would say that it's going too far to call capitalism a repressive ideology. And to be clear, I'm obviously not saying that democracy is, but capitalism is not inherently democratic. That's a piece of propaganda, really. The rich want to get richer and, keep the rest of us poor, or make us even poorer. And so they want us to think that criticizing capitalism is the same as criticizing democracy. Communism and democracy can go together, just like capitalism and a dictatorship can. I'm especially talking about laissez-faire capitalism, but I don't really approve of any form of capitalism, without major communist elements. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people that, if you watch this video and you disagree, try to think of if you've had bosses, plural, that didn't seem to care about what happened to you. Like, I remember a while back there was this joke online where someone said, okay, so yesterday was the apocalypse. What are you doing today? And someone just pointed out, well, my boss says he still expects me to come in, so I guess I'm working. That's such a painfully true, yeah, just fuck me. Now, other than that, I think we've reached the part where, so, Emily talks to her daughter, and you've got the thing about, like, how's your leg? Because we saw earlier, he said, there's her leg was injured. That's also something, so in these stories, people will fake injuries if they think there's some way that could help them. I guess no one fakes an injury in the Fliz story, and RMF is flying Fliz, but there was coerced self-mutilation. So that's, yeah. But yeah, so we have the bit with the, so how's your leg? Oh, I mean, it's fine. So that's a very telling reaction for two reasons. So obviously, her leg's fine. Nothing happened. He was lying. He followed his wife. Once again, it's technically stalking. And I really appreciate Lanthimos movies acknowledging these things that are like, because some people would say, you can only stalk a stranger. No, like stalking technically, if, it's the same as with rape. Like, it's about consent. If you did not consent to what is, what the other person is doing, then it qualifies as stalking, rape, kidnapping, these various things. It's not about if it's a stranger. A lot of these, like, I forget the number, but there's this pretty high percentage of children kidnapped. It's one of the parents who did it, Now, I think that does cover, yeah, so, but yeah, she almost immediately goes to, oh, yeah, right, my leg's fine. So she also understands, which either means her father told her that her mom just needs to be reassured whatever she asks, which is, setting up for being able to continue gaslighting, or maybe she knows, oh, right, dad lies about important things sometimes, so he's standing right there. I gotta just go along with it, And yeah, she says, do something for me and promise you're going to do it. Stay as far away from daddy as you can. Which, it's one of those things of like, yeah, I agree, but like, how? Especially if you're not, because at this point, Emily is not leaving the cult. She's not staying left the cult. She's gonna try to get back to it, so it's not like she can. Yeah. And I also, I do not think that she does not bring the child into the cult because she doesn't want the child to live like that. I think there's probably just strict rules about how new members, I'm not entirely sure do they have any underage members at all? I'm not sure they do. And a lot of cults will demand you leave behind your family. And that is, of course, because there's a previously established dynamic between the members of a family, and integration into a cult is more difficult if you have someone, because if the cult leader says, okay, now Emily, you go and do this thing. If Emily's husband is right there saying, Emily has clearly told me she does not want to do that. No, honey, you don't have to do it just because he said, you know what, we can just go home. And yeah, cults, and some other ideologies like to try to get you when you are, or feel you are, at your lowest, when you are struggling and you feel like there's no hope. They'll try to swoop in and give you that just so that they can control you. And that's, not only cults, there's also parts of the far right that do the exact same thing. Note that I did not say everyone conservative is like that. I specified the far right, and I said parts of it, not all of it. So, I mean, I'm not saying that I take issue with everyone on the far right, but not everyone does this exact thing. They do other things that are terrible. Anyway, I believe that does bring in us. Let's see. There's at least one more thing that I really wanted to make sure to say. Fuck, was it again? It was. It wasn't that. It was. Goddamn back pain. Okay, I'll think of it real quick and then close out the video. I've said almost everything by now anyway. Yeah, so she talks to, she's told that, Ruth's sister should be dead, so it is okay, and yeah, also just seeing, because Ruth's sister, she knows about the cult and their beliefs, but she's apparently not a member because no member talks to Emily anymore. So, but yeah, so she goes to Ruth by engaging in some of that by now trademark Yorgos Lanthimos having a character do something really cruel. I'm not saying it's the only thing in this movie, obviously, but yeah, this poor dog, this ownerless dog who just wants a person, and then she goes and slices its paw, and then goes to Ruth, the vet, and yeah, has various, so how old? 5. Looks older than 5. 6. I'm very distraught. How is the dog? Oh, Mary's fine. You mean Linda? My husband calls her Linda. I call her Mary. And, as soon as the treatment's done, she just says, okay, now go. Doesn't even, rehome this dog and say, oh, hey, I'm sorry, I have to go out of town for a while, but the vet insisted that she get this medication. No, just, yeah. Because this is not, this dog is no longer useful to her. It's not going to help her get back into the cult. She has internalized. She accepts that she is disposable to the cult, but she also believes others to be disposable to her. And yeah, shit rolls downhill. Not the first time Yorgos Lanthimos has explored that. Anyway, yeah, and she finds out, oh, so this is where you weigh the animals, and she uses it later on Quali, which also, yeah, she's treating Quali not as a person, not as an end unto herself, but as, means to an end. Nothing, yeah. And that does bring us to the, let's see. I believe, there's at least one more thing that I really want to make sure to say. Yeah, we have the bit where Ruth's sister kills herself. And I do appreciate, Emily, she's like, what do you mean this? It does, but she also does go through with, going for Ruth. So, yeah. I guess if Ruth had died first, her sister would be ruthless. And she, yeah, she comes back and says, thank you so much. I bought you a scarf. Can I just put it on you? And she keeps pushing. And this poor woman who's like, well, I mean, part of her job description is to calm people down and be very sympathetic and such. Because every so often she has to kill an animal and charge money for it. So like literally, it's crucial for her to be able to go along with if a person, and it's also like, oh, that sounds kind of nice, silk scarf, Jesus Christ, that's not inexpensive. And the thing about like, oh, there's animals on it, like your job. The cult has just ruined her ability to like relate to other people. Like I don't know, I'm sorry, a scarf with a bunch of animals on it, that kind of sounds like either part of like cosplay or something a child would wear or something. It doesn't really sound, and like the doctor is sitting there saying like, I don't think I should be wearing a scarf with animals on it while working on animals. That feels just, kind of like, I mean, she says it doesn't really, it clashes with what I'm currently wearing, but that's still, and so she gives her the injection, and I love, again, that feels such a Lanthimos trait. She isn't knocked out immediately. There's like 2 seconds or something. It's just, ow, what did you just stick me with? And Emily's just like, what lovely weather we're having. Just like, I don't know what the fuck to say at this point. I mean, I think in really, she just like goes like, oh, she like mumbles or something. It's just amazing, and then collapse. And she gets weighed, measured, and then taken to the, and it works. It's the right person. And I love the fucking celebratory dance. That was amazing. And that's apparently something that she just did between takes on Poor Things. And, when Lanthimos found out, he was like, oh, you got to do that in the new movie or something like that. Let's see. I believe that pretty much gets us to the, yeah, I think so. She's got her there at the car. I have to say, I did get the sense that it wasn't going to go well. But in part that's because, in the first one it went well, but it's bittersweet because we're like, the fuck is Rayway gonna ask for next? It's getting fucking Manson family-esque here. And then the second one is like, this is in his mind, isn't it? Or even if not, it's like, so he had to commit murder in order to bring her back. And she, Liz did not see Fliz. Like, it's not impossible that like 2 seconds after that, she walks in and sees this corpse, mutilated corpse with a liver on, and is like, you know what? I left the oven on in another country. Don't wait up. And yeah, I think that does bring us to the yeah. So I was thinking it'll go wrong, but I was kind of thinking Ruth isn't suicidal, so she's not gonna like open the door and jump out, is she? Because she's like, we clearly see that she's coming to. She's waking up in the back of the car, and yeah, Emily offers her some water, and Emily's actually one of the people who really should have one of those cups that say, the tears of my political enemies. Anyway, yeah, she should have watched the road. She should have pulled over. And the fact that it's so beautifully set up, because I wasn't sure if it was setting anything up, but she fucking loves driving that thing fast. She absolutely fucking loves driving this thing super fast, and yeah, eventually she's in a car accident. And that is what they say. Like, yeah, it's going well right now, but at some point, if you always drive fast, then eventually you're in an accident. Anyway, I think that does. But and yeah, the way that as soon as she like when she picks up the water, we're already like, so that's where it's going. It's actually gonna, and like a second or two later, we see the accident. And yeah, she went flying through the windshield. Just yeah, and she's clearly dead. She's not moving. Although there's one tear cried, so I just a tiny bit. Yeah, but yeah, and we've gotten all this detail about the boat and all this stuff, and just yeah, And yeah, it's just it's so perfectly fucked up, this thing about, this vet who was just trying to live a normal life, suddenly dies brutally because of this fucking cult, because of these people who want to have power over others. She didn't ask for this. Like, yeah, she's got the gift, she's got the power, but she wasn't even asked if she wanted to be part of it. And something I have noticed about people who don't ask permission before they do something that they know there's some chance, you know, they wouldn't get permission for. Like, I appreciate there are situations where, let's say um, someone, you've got a patient, they have to be in surgery, they're unconscious, you cannot ask them personally for consent. There's specific rules under those circumstances. Anyway, yeah, if you encounter someone who chooses not to ask permission before doing something that they know that a lot of the time people do ask permission for, it's frequently that they knew that they might get a no, and they wanted to do it more than they wanted it to be consensual. And those are people to watch out for. So I think that is just about everything. But yeah, yeah, just real quick. Hypothetically, let's say she consented to it. Emily wouldn't have knocked her out. Like, why bother? She consented. Like, it's not like you're doing something that's like, so yeah. And yeah, she would have been fully conscious in the back of the car, and you could have just put the water right next to her, or, if you lift it in the air and she leans forward, she can grab it from your hand while you're in the front seat without you having to take your eyes off the road, that kind of thing. And yeah, really, really amazing movie. I had less issues with it than Poor Things, but I already talked about my Poor Things issues in my Poor Things video, especially the Poor Things thoughts part of the Poor Things video. Yeah, I really hope to get to watch more Lanthimos. Right now, I'm not sure if I'm gonna go to a theater for one of his movies, because there's already so many other movies I watch in theaters, but we'll see. Yeah, I guess that does cover everything. So yeah, in the Fliz story, we do see there at the end that yeah, a certain pop culture icon was wrong, perhaps about more things, but yeah, when they said, that they don't, you know, they overestimated their ability to be living with no liver.